So episode 3 of Season 3 of Railgun has arrived, and a majority of this episode was a pretty straight and narrow schoolyard activity, except this time kind of mixed with powers. But I have to say, once again, it just kind of flexes how interesting the world of Railgun truly is, that you can take such basic activities from the schoolyard, any of your sporting events, like, hey, you have a balloon somewhere on your body, you're trying to pop it, except here we have kind of superheroes doing it, but I did like the limitation of not really using your powers, but more so you have to actually pop the balloon with the beanie bag there, because otherwise Railgun could just snipe from the distance, things like that. And it was quite fun seeing that, especially because it wasn't really focused on some of the central characters, but rather just some of the other participants and just how they were trying to go up against such devastating forces. I thought that was actually the best way to make this episode interesting, is rather than just saying, okay, once again, here's our central cast, they are going to be the stars of the show. They did get some spotlight, don't get me wrong, but a good amount was like, these people are frightening. We are going to have notes on their strengths, on their weaknesses, and we're going to do everything we can to take them out. The reason that was a good system was that these characters are kind of all-stars in their own little realm there. I mean, Misaki is kind of like a hotshot just by name. Oh my god, is that the Railgun? Like, it kind of makes sense that if you're going to have, like, these school versus school competitions, people are going to know, just very scared of what they will go up against, and they're going to find very nasty ways, and also very clever ways to deal with the competition. I mean, look at the clone, look at what happened to her. We had this, like, little bug droid that was kind of flying around, and it kind of got knocked out. I mean, at first, it was just like, oh, it was kind of a cheap distraction. I was like, that's kind of scummy, but it is what it is. But then when you see Misaki and how the queen was kind of like involved in this, probably wanting to see what's up with her kind of rivals' clones, and why is she in two places at one time, or why can't she read her with her ability? Like, it starts setting up a more serious narrative while also just being fun shenanigans in the schoolyard, or I guess the streets is how we should say it. Absolute blast to watch. Like, I love how every character kind of has their own, like, little weakness, like, you know, a spider, or just the idea of not wanting to get your clothes dirty because you pay too much for them. Having just all the little things happen, like overconfidence and how you don't really take into consideration that there could be other people surrounding you. There's a lot of like little basic moments, but it added up to being a really engaging plotline. I think it would be very easy to make an event such as this like a 3 to 5 minute thing and then we move on to the next objective. But the fact that like 15 minutes of this episode was literally students running around with a balloon on their head and how they would either deal with the obstacle at hand or get completely annihilated by their opponents. That was actually quite fun, because in a lot of ways, like, this series is like miniature superheroes, put them into like a basic schoolyard competition, and it immediately becomes something that you can't really compare to. And a big thing that makes like this world so interesting is, rather than what a lot of like series such as this would do, is abilities would be limited to one person. So if you have the ability to levitate something, or the ability to shoot basically a railgun from your fingertips, that would be limited to one person. But here, a bunch of characters can have the same ability, but there's different levels and variations of it. So it's quite interesting just to see how some people will get mocked, being like, oh, you're just such a low level, you can just kind of float something, but you're not actually that strong, and then there's a more powerful opponent waiting in the bush. It's quite fun to see that. I think just the way they are exploring the abilities and the students in this competition, even though this isn't going to be the main hook of the season, it is nice to get the ball rolling, and yeah, we're 3 weeks in, but it's so nice to see how they're casually and very naturally pacing it to make us say, like, yeah, the queen is going to have a major importance of this season. I mean, it's clear as day, she recognizes Misaki, she has her secrets. There's no way that was her in the competition. She was spying, she was looking, she knows something is up, and whether that's something super sinister or more just curious remains to be seen. But to have that type of narrative is going to be incredible for this arc, and I can understand why a lot of people are hyping it up, because the idea of exposing such a big secret and how she's been kind of keeping it to herself because, well, these are pretty much her sisters to her. Like, she didn't ask for this to happen. Like, she kind of feels guilty and she wants to take care of them, and to have someone like really prying, especially someone she has no love for, I think is going to make for a really great story this season, mixed together with all the other conspiracies that they're probably going to explore. Something I've always really adored about the clones and Misaki is how they do have this bond that normally you wouldn't see, but I love how much of a sister dynamic they have. Like, the idea that she's not even like mad that her clone took her place. Like, on one hand, she kind of blames herself for not being there. There's no reason why they really shouldn't think it was her. Of course, she feels a little hurt that her personality isn't strong enough that they can't recognize that it wasn't her and she was a little more robotic. But still, like, her clone did nothing wrong. She kind of got roped into it, and had she not participated, she would have been disqualified. And I mean, she kind of did much better than she would have because she had to deal with such devastating attacks that should you get touched once, you're going to get killed. So her kind of going up against all these madmen and mad women, it just kind of worked in her favor. So it was nice to see how she just kind of like rewarded her, being like, did you have fun? That's all that matters. Go buy yourself a treat. Of course, I knew it wasn't going to last, but it was nice to see that little wholesome dynamic before she kind of crashed down and the poor kitty had to look at her master just being like, oh god, what's going to happen to her? It's just like, that's the hook you want to see. Like, this episode was so fun. I was just like, we literally are watching students run from street to street, either throwing a beanbag or levitating a beanbag, shooting a beanbag. It is so basic. It's one of the most schoolyard activities you can think of for a sporting day, yet it feels so interesting because you're combining it with such arrogance, but also overconfidence. You have this overconfidence ego of like, oh, I'm level 5, I'm level 4, no way a level 2 could beat me. But because of that, you get your balloon pods. Like, I mean, it's just funny to look at that and see how they were exploring all these characters. And I was really happy to see that they didn't just put the focus directly on Misaki or the clone or, any of the main characters. I liked how it was from the side of the weaklings, people who you would think they're not going to win. There's no way they're going to win. And then they ended up winning. Granted, I'm not going to say there wasn't some scummy tactics behind it, but it was nice to see that these characters competing aren't incompetent and they actually did their homework because they are weak in their mind. So you have to make up for your shortcomings in whichever way you can, and by being intelligent was clearly their objective. And I really don't know where they want to go with episode 4 because, I mean, obviously we know there's going to be some interrogation, there's probably going to be some experimentation to some degree. How the hell is there 2 versions of this one girl? Why did it happen? I don't know what will happen after that though. Like, once you get the answer of it being a clone, where do you want to go with that? Do you want to clone yourself? Is there something more sinister, or is it more just curiosity? I think they have a lot of ways to take that arc and make it incredibly interesting, and this episode was just incredibly wholesomely fun. It really was. Like, this is a show that it kind of connects with more people than you would think. I mean, just look at, Billy and just how many streams this show gets, right? It is ridiculous how popular it is, and I love this show. I eat it up every single week. I ate up the binge when I binged to the first 2 seasons. But there is something about the dynamic of the cast here that even though a lot of the elements seen here are, yeah, you can look over to this anime or this anime, even some of the character designs, but the way they bring it together, it just has this unique aura that just screams, in a lot of ways, perfection. Obviously, I don't think it's a perfect anime across the board, but when you enjoy it and you really just consume it, it does give you that feeling as if you're just having fun, and unless you really sit back afterwards to kind of dissect it, you just kind of leave with a smile on your face, and you just are anticipating the next episode, which is why I'm not surprised that this has been one of the most anticipated anime that hopefully would get a new season, because, I mean, the show, it just pops, it flourishes, it does an exceptional job, and I mean, now that we're really starting to get the narrative rolling here, we've had our fun with the competitions, we've had our flirtatious moments, we've had our mother being like, hey, get me some wine, talking to her underage daughter to buy her wine, I love that. We've had those moments, and we're still going to have some of those moments, but the fact that now the ball is truly moving, we got Misaki, we got Misaki, just the clone angle, like, this story is going to unfold with maximum chaos, I'm absolutely sure, and I can't wait to see where they're going to take it. I have no idea truly where they want to go. I have a good idea of, like, the general direction, but in terms of execution, who knows? And that's an exciting feeling. The one thing that I can definitely say about this season that I'm kind of happy about, because this arc here, I think it takes place in the first 8 episodes of Season 2 of Index, if I'm remembering correctly. And of course, we're going to see some things that we kind of recognize if had you watched that anime, but at the same time, I like how they're not directly doing the same thing. Like, obviously, some of the events, they seem familiar. We're like, oh, we kind of recognize this, or we recognize this character interaction and meetup. But I like how they're not just rehashing it, because sometimes when these 2 plot lines, like, kind of interlink with the Index and Railgun, you can kind of say, like, oh, it's kind of fun to see it from this perspective, but it does feel a little too familiar. I like how so far with these 3 episodes, you definitely get a familiar element to it, but it still has its own unique thing going on. We're seeing things from, obviously, the characters' perspectives, what they're truly doing in the moment, but I like how even when you have, like, Toma and we have Misaki kind of meet up, things like that, I like how it's not a direct copy and paste from the previous adaptation with Index Season 2. I like how they're actually incorporating them in a new and fresh way. Obviously, I'm sure there's going to be some dialogue, some overlap that we recognize, but I do like seeing how both of their stories were interacting in such a fun dynamic and just setting overall, because it does feel like different things are happening, while at the same time similar things are happening, if that makes sense. Basically, these 2 characters and these 2 plot lines, they were always kind of interlinking in a weird way, but also doing their own thing at the same time. And the fact that Railgun is my favorite perspective in this universe, it just makes this entire situation so fun, because last time we focused on the setting with Index, it was cool to see it, but we really didn't get to see some of the more casual moments like these sporting events in their entirety. So it's really fun to see that play out and really get a good moment to relax before we get into the stressful or the more exhilarating, where we have the Railgun just firing off, seeing all the abilities go off and the conspiracy unravel. It's just really fun to see how they're incorporating it without making it feel like a direct copy and paste, but also feel familiar all in the process, which I absolutely love. What did everyone think of this week's episode of Railgun? Did you love it, hate it, favorite moment? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and remember to hit that subscribe button if you have been new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.